Hello and welcome to another SonicLAB. Today we're looking at the brand new NYX 2 desktop synthesizer from Dreadbox or Dreadbox NYX. They're a Greek manufacturer. We love their synthesizers here. There's something about them that just kind of speaks to me. I don't know whether it's, I always mention they have quite a lot of charisma. Certainly the NYX 1, Mark 1 had a lot of charisma. It had this massive reverb in it, DSP reverb, that just kind of made you want to create these massive ambient and dreamy synth textures. NYX 2 follows on from that, but what they've done is they've changed the form. This is the same form as the Erebus Mark III. It's all now surface mount technology, makes it a bit quicker for them to build so they can keep up with demand, because people seem to love their synths, and there's a good reason, because they do generally sound pretty good. So NYX 2 takes the same basic concept of the NYX synthesizers, which is two oscillators, a dual filter, which is kind of combined to be series or parallel, modulators, and a reverb. But they've changed a few things up. The reverb is no longer made by Crazy Tube Circuits. That was an algorithm that was supplied by them. They've now got their own algorithm. Unfortunately, it's also mono, which is a real shame. It's such a shame they couldn't have gone stereo, because that would have been really awesome. But they have added a number of additional parameters, which are kind of a bit like what you get in the Hypnosis. It's just sort of like a modulator for the pre-delay, so you get this kind of wobble going into this reverb, then we've got feedback and size, so we can get these sort of massively infinite reverbs. More on that later. We've got the same modulators, 1, 2 and 3, which can be loopable in LFO mode or work in key-on kind of envelope. We've got rise, fall, and instead of a switch, we've actually now got a hold level, which is like sustain. These now do have a much wider range, which is one of my criticisms. So you've got the dual analog filter, which again does sound lovely. And then, of course, we've got a decent featured patch bay. I think there's 30 odd points on this, so it definitely increases the amount of patchability. We've got a MIDI in and a MIDI out. MIDI in is hardwired to the CV gate, and we've got a wheel and modulator outputs and whatnot up here. So let's get straight into it. What I'm going to do is I'll switch the filter into VCA mode, which means that the oscillators are just going directly bypassing the filter, so we're not going to listen to that at all at this stage. So we've got a pair of oscillators, same sort of deal as the Erebus, a saw wave, and the good thing is now we have plus or minus-ish an octave on the range, which is always a limitation of the original, both the Erebus and the NYX. Independent glide for each one, which unfortunately is not, all the scaling's a little bit off on the controller. I'd like to have seen it being much less happening in the first third of travel. It's sort of almost, only a little bit is almost too much, but that we can live with that. 3 octave range on the switch, and we've also got a square wave, which does sound really quite nice and has got a good buzz. In fact, what we'll do is let's just modulate the pulse width, because we can access that via the patch bay. Pulse width in, switch modulator 2 into LFO mode, and then just make it sawtooth, or we can make it sort of triangle. And it goes nice and slow. Almost too slow to hear, but that's good, because that's the one thing that was a bit of a problem with the original NYX. The modulators didn't go slow enough or fast enough, in my opinion. So now we've got a much wider range, which is jolly good. So second oscillator, a triangle, which has got, again, a really good thump to it, and then obviously a sawtooth. One thing that should be mentioned It's paraphonic in the same way that the original, both the Erebus and the previous NYX were. There is a little dip switch on the back that allows you to disable that, so it'll always play in unison. We can also sync the oscillators. For some really nice action. And while we're at it, we can actually access the CV of each oscillator independently. So if we want to patch it in from one of the modulators, we can do that. And there's also global CV. There's also level control for each of the ones, which I think is a new thing, and that's kind of nice. So for instance, I might have, let's get a bit of that reverb on there. Again, I have to stop myself. This is one of those synthesizers that's very easy to just get lost in. In fact, it's one of those ones that's hard to review because every time you switch it on, you go, oh, that's nice. And then because everything's so long with the reverbs, you end up going to go, oh, yes, is that the time? I really ought to get on with this review. But suffice to say that the building blocks of this are really nice. We'll come straight into the filter now, because the filter is obviously a major part of this. We'll do our usual sawtooth into the filter, and we'll switch the routing to go normal, and we're in low pass mode, which basically means the two filters are sort of joined together to be one low pass filter. Bit of resonance. And it's got that thing. It does sound very nice. And of course we can go into bandpass mode. As soon as you get some reverb on that, those harmonics just sound. And then high pass mode. We can really pluck out those low harmonics there. And of course, looking at the filter again, we can split the peaks between the filters. So we can get dual harmonics with this offset. This is a little bit easier than it was on the original NYX, which had a slider called post, which really didn't sort of make any sense. It sort of somehow feels a bit easier to dial this in here. And if we go into bandpass, you can hear those two harmonics. Notes to create almost kind of chordal stuff. I mean, we're already getting there. Slow down, we're going too far. The thing about the filter is it allows you to route it in some very interesting ways. So let's just go over that filter routing. Normal is both VCOs go to both filters, low pass and high pass. Remember, there's 12 dB there, two two-pole filters. Split will take oscillator 1 to the left filter and oscillator 2 to the right. VCA will bypass both filters, and half will send both oscillators to filter 2. We've got just the resonance of filter 1 and the resonance of filter 2 plus and then this will change the separation between them, so we can get these amazing chords. Yeah, here I go again. Just the thing about the reverb, it really brings a thing to life. And I'm a big fan of effects on synths, and the Erebus had the delay, NYX one had this reverb. And the thing I like about this is the reverb gets you in all sorts of places. So if we just get back to a sort of fairly straightforward sound. LFO LFO is normalised to the pitch modulation at its shortest. Still quite long. Would have been nice to have a bit shorter. And then the size comes up, and then we've got a feedback which really starts to bring up the, till we get to this kind of endless reverb. We take the size down and we get a sort of different coarse tonality. Now to my ears it's not quite as finessed as the Crazy Tube circuit, but it does have a lot more adaptability, so we can change the character of it. So, you know, it swings and roundabouts here. Another thing that this has got, which is kind of cool, is the ability to modulate. I think it's either the pre-delay or some part of the feedback cycle. So if we just get this reverb, we've got this kind of, it's like a sample and hold. And it's stepped down here and smoothed up here. But on the patch bay, we've also got the ability to take that out. Perhaps if I do this, I can illustrate a bit more clearly what's going on. So I'll put it into CV, take that down. And you see, we go from sample and hold to sample and glide. So we get a sample and hold, but we can apply it to the reverb as well. It's kind of an interesting way of doing things. And once again, as is the case with a lot of the stuff with Dreadbox, it's just kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And it's something different that you're not going to find anywhere else. Even on a synth, which is on the face of it, you know, seemingly quite a limited palette. But essentially the reverb, I think, is what this synth is all about. I mean, it really just... One thing that's kind of nice about it, so if we just get some low stuff going on here, but what we could do is we could have just the reverb. I mean, you know me, I'm always going to like that sort of thing. And again, all I could really do is reiterate the fact that it's just a real shame that it's not stereo, because if it was stereo, it would be awesome. Also, what would be awesome would be to have a reverb out and a dry out on here, so that we could maybe do things like modulate the level, that kind of thing. I mean, yeah, sure, there's going to be limitations, but I mean, they're not so glaring and so difficult that it means that, you know, this thing is rendered useless. It's still a very interesting and fun synth to explore. So back to the patch bay again, because there's some interesting things we can do here. Let's say if we look at these, we've got the ability to modulate or control the fall of the modulator A and B. So we could take the LFO output into the fall one and then come back. We press our little sequence. The LFO is now modulating the fall part of LFO1, and I guess we could use that to, if it's in LFO mode, we can get it to do some very interesting things. I mean, I think what I found with the way that they've set this up is there are lots of ways to get into all sorts of peculiar, sort of interesting synthesis nooks and crannies. And while I've been reviewing this synth, there's been some outputs. I mean, quite often Andy will be in the office and go, oh, that sounds nice. Well, I'm just exploring. And there's a lot of things that do sound really nice. And I think this is an improvement over the original NYX, because it just feels like everything's a little bit easier to understand and easier to get to. Even down to, you know, the filter routing and the way to be able to offset the two different things. We can create some very interesting sounds here. As I say, my only real criticism is there's no stereo reverb. I suppose if I'm going to be starting to look at other things, these envelopes, as far as I can tell, they're only single trigger. So there's no legato mode for any of them. So that makes it, you know, if you're thinking of sort of monosynth playing, that might put you off a little bit. But I think it makes up for things in a lot of different ways, and that is something that, you know, it's very much swings and roundabouts. You know, there are things you think, oh, it'd be nice if, but it's like, oh, but it does this. And that's what I like about the Dreadbox stuff. The intrinsic sound of it and the kind of just the character is very compelling argument in terms of if you're I suppose argument if you're arguing with yourself as to whether you need another synthesizer and why you should buy this one. So the NYX 2 is priced at €539. So yeah, I mean, it's still boutique kind of pricing, but the thing about the Dreadbox stuff is it's got something that a lot of other synths don't have. It's a certain something. There is this kind of X factor that you get with them. And I'm not just saying that because, you know, it's European, it's Greek. It's actually about the sound. And yeah, it's about, I think the Erebus V3 is about €499. This is, what, about 40, 50 euros more, but it's obviously got the extra DSP in there, so maybe that's one of the reasons it's a little bit more expensive. I mean, the bottom line is if you're looking for something that has character and is a bit different to everything else, then the NYX is definitely something to look at. I mean, I suppose in many ways, if you like that kind of ambient noodling, if that's your thing, I mean, soundtrack work, those sort of things, I mean, it creates a huge wall of sound for just essentially a mono synth. I mean, that's quite impressive. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.